This is The Change Physician, episode 251.
Hey, folks, and welcome back to The Change Physician. This is Dr. Kevin Cuccaro with my co-host with the most host, Dr. Melissa
That's
Katie.
a new one. Nice.
Yeah, well, I had to think of something, And for today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 3 key life-changing questions that you can really ask at any point in your life to sort of instigate change. And this particular episode came from a discussion that I actually was having with my co-host here, Dr. Melissa Katie.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about, I think, topics for a discussion. And she goes, we have 3 key questions. And the questions that you came up with were, who am I? What do I want to do with my life? And how can I make money without spending more time? Or maybe these were specific ones. These are specific questions that you were asking.
Yeah.
And I really like those questions. So I want to talk about them more. But would you mind providing some background about why are these questions important to you?
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is kind of a silent dilemma for a lot of people. We go through our life and we just, people put us on a path. We go to school, or we're influenced by our parents, and sometimes you are just so influenced by the outside world, you just kind of conform yourself into what they're guiding you into and what you've been exposed to. But sometimes it takes you out of the game of trying to understand who you are. And so, and I can't say I've always reflected on that in my younger years, being that I'm almost 50. It's like, I feel like the late 30s or definitely the 40s have been these years of kind of, and I will say, in my mid 30s, of course, I'd gone through a divorce. I left my ex-husband, and I had a conversation with some friends. And when I was trying to put into words, just trying to figure out who I am or what I want to do, mainly it came to me as what I want to do. But in essence, it's like, you don't know who you are. Sometimes you don't know what you want to do. And the person in front of me, which was my friend's husband, said, "Oh, it sounds like you're going through an existential crisis." I'm like, what the hell is that? I'm in my mid 30s and I'm like, what is that? So I had to go look it up. And then they mentioned a book to go read. It's kind of a parable of some sort. And I can't remember the name of it. I have it downstairs, but it really hit me. And then, so my awareness of this, this is not just me. There are so many other people that go through this. And most of the time we see it in our 20s or at college, what do I want to do with my life? I don't, but buried in that is, who am I? Because kind of those two things are really tied together. I mean, you can just go make money or whatever, but everyone's seeking out. I mean, no one really stays in their first job. They're always trying to seek out something that gives them meaning, or something that they enjoy, or something that's not just I just need to slug through the day. So to me, I feel like it's really a lifelong journey of figuring that out. Lots of experiences, interactions with people that help you understand who you are, and then being okay with it. Because a lot of times we're trying to be like other people, especially in your school years. And now I think the younger generation wants to be different, but then that's kind of become its own thing. But yeah, I think who you are and what do you want to do. But then for people like me, that I've learned about myself is I get bored really easily, and I need challenges. Hence I'm called the challenge doctor. Yes, self-named, but I feel like I want to have the freedom to, whether I love to travel, I love to explore, I love things that are different than me. I'm not afraid. I see a lot of people that are very uncomfortable around different, and they have an instilled fear from that. So I'd love to I find that there's this pull my whole life to find ways to make money that's passive, or where you're not having to just put yourself in one hole, because I find that I'm multifaceted and I can't just do one thing. So if you can create income that gives you the freedom to flow in and out or part-time and stuff, that feels like the ultimate way to live your life. And yeah, so I hope that answered your question.
Kind of, because I think there's I was sort of dissecting these as I tend to dissect everything.
Dissecting me?
No, dissecting the questions, not
Oh.
you. Dissecting because I think these are really core questions. And when we first brought them up, or when you first brought them up, it was like, oh, these rang really, you resonated with me quite a bit, right? Because there's a question of who am I? And that's sort of this core or constructed identity that we have. And we could talk about that in a little second. What do I want to do with my life? And that becomes like a reflection of who you are, right? Because if you're doing something that is inconsistent with who you view yourself to be, then we start getting into this dissonance, and then we have some problems associated with it. And then the last one, though, I was trying to, I said just before we started, I was like, I'm trying to reward this. How can I make money without spending more time? And I think that is more of a question of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
How can I be free, and what does that mean? And we see this idea, or I feel this idea, because I've experienced this as well, of money being a proxy for freedom. And because there's this time for money thing, like if we're working time for money, then we're sort of leveraging time in order to make money to live. And there's this, everybody in medicine, passive income, and I need to buy real estate, and I need to do passive because I don't want to be practicing anymore, blah, blah, blah. And really the question is, well, how do you free yourself so you don't have this external perception, or this perception of external control over you? Mm-hmm. So, and the reason I bring that up is it may not be passive income per se that provides the freedom path for you. Making time without this, it becomes as well, how can I maintain my life in a sensitive way where I have a sense of control over what I do and when I do it? And that's a different kind of question, and it has lots of different answers for it. These sound, some people may be listening to this and going, oh, these are really simple questions. I don't know. Because I do think they change. And like you said, there's an element of an existential crisis, which we haven't defined here, but an existential crisis is a feeling of unease or conflict, or inner conflict, that can cause people to question their meaning and purpose in life. When you have the sense of dread, anxiety, confusion, dissatisfaction around deeper questions such as who you are, death, they're generally triggered by life events. These critical time periods. So divorce, graduation from a high school or college or medical school, transitioning between jobs, maybe a major trauma or a loss. There are these periods of change sort of promote or encourage a time to reflect on these on these core questions. Who are we?
Yeah.
Now then thinking about that who am I question, I guess I struggle with a lot of these, like these two basics, like who am I and what do I want? And I go, I don't know. And maybe, I wonder sometimes is at the point I am, so I'm 50 years old. I didn't really start thinking these questions until, well, I guess 15 years ago. I mean, because it was 2008 when I really started. It was sort of this core shift for me when I start being aware that, hey, you know what? You don't have to just live your life. You can actually plan a life, or you can actually start asking what is that you want, and start to actively pursue things in that major, or that in that way. And but it's just the weirdest thing, because now I'm like, I don't know who exactly am I and what exactly do I want.
Yeah.
And if you can't answer those two questions, then the third one of how you want to spend your time, or how is it that you want to have freedom of time? So maybe it is, how do I want to spend my time? Maybe that's the question. Maybe that's a better question. Becomes very, very difficult to do.
Yeah.
And it's not as simple as, I don't know. And so if someone out there may have the answers really, really quick, and if you do have them really, really quick, then good for you. Right. And I hope you're pursuing them, and I hope that they're resonating with you and they're feeling genuine. For those of you who aren't, I think some reflection is definitely in order, and that becomes a much more difficult process. Who are you? And like you point out very early on is, if you have been driven by external circumstances, and then you're now in a position to actually start asking these questions about who am I? What do I want? What do I believe in? What are my values? what do I want to do that supports those values? How do I want to spend my time? That can be very, very difficult. If you were pigeonholed into medical school because of that's what the family told you to do, and you never had a moment to actually discuss, well, what do I want and what aligns with me? That could be a challenging circumstance to be in.
Yeah. Well, you made me think of, I just wrote a few notes here, is that, so sometimes you think about relationships with other people. Sometimes, when you're in relationships, a lot of us learn the hard way. You go through it yourself and you discover not necessarily what you want. Sometimes the most powerful thing is what you don't want. And I feel like there's this same thing that happens, not just in relationship to other people. So relationship with other people, you figure out what you don't want in other people, but the relationship you start having with yourself, which suddenly arises after you create somehow some epiphany or creation of awareness that you have, that you finally maybe it's after the divorce, you realize, well, what do I want? Who am I? What do I want to do with my life? How do I want to spend my time? The relationship within yourself. There's also this situation of, you're trying to live for yourself and not live for others, but then you're trying to figure out, well, what do I not want in my life with myself? When I think of my pleasure and what I would want in this short time we have on earth, like, what do I want it to consist of, or what do I want it to look like? Like, those things are, this whole existential crisis of sorts is just a very profound and nebulous. Sometimes you feel like you're just looking in the dark, trying to figure out what's the answer. But sometimes it's the experiences in life that make you realize, well, this doesn't bring me joy, and why.
Well, and I think that's a very powerful reframe, right? Because say if you're going through these kind of questions of identity or questions of who you are, what you want to do, the one way is the positive reframing. Well, what is that you want? And so that's very, very difficult for, at least for me. I have a really hard time identifying what is that I want and who exactly am I. But the negative, and I'm going to sneeze here in a second. Excuse me.
All good.
Guess I'm allergic to something.
Your body didn't want something.
And I always sneeze in twos. I don't know why.
That's fine.
Weirdest thing. But is the negative reframe. So if you can identify what it is that you actually want or the things that you are interested in, is to list out the stuff that you don't want. And I think for some of us, maybe we have more of a negativity bias. It becomes much easier to say, well, these are the things I don't want. Mm-hmm. And it is a different, attraction and repulsion, right? So if you don't want this stuff, well, then don't do that. If you hate cutting on things, don't go into surgery. Mm-hmm. If you want control of your time, then go into a profession where you're going to have control over your clinical schedule. So I do think those are, if you don't know exactly, if you're trying to frame things like what does I want, who am I, and you can't really think of a good question, well, who am I not, and what is it that I don't want to do? Yeah. And I think that's really, really, really powerful, because sometimes it's a lot easier for someone to say, well, I know what I don't want.
Yes.
Yes, that.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because we both have something in common, that we both at different points in our career recognize, and we talk about these existential crises that can happen during these like sudden epiphanies or realizations of what you don't want, and or not in alignment with who you are, which we both like truth. And we both realized that we no longer wanted to do interventional pain the way it's traditionally done in America. And that in and of itself can be, that whole thing is profound. Like, that's telling us we don't want to do that. And it helps define, I think they both feed each other. Like, they help define, it helps you understand who you are when you realize this is not what you want. And then you ask yourself, well, why is it I don't want that? I think that is extremely powerful. Yeah. big
Well,
change in our life.
it provides sort of a frame of action, right? Because if you know
Yeah.
it's not that way and that way and that way, well, that only leaves you this way and this way to go.
Hmm.
And so if you start taking action towards whatever that may be, then you may discover, hey, yeah, actually, this is something that I want to do, or you might discover this is something I don't want to do.
Yeah.
But that experience, at least of pursuing it and trying it, becomes very then useful to kind of hone in on these questions of who am I and what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. The two things I know I don't like to do a lot of is, and they kind of go hand in hand. I don't like to sit all day long and I like freedom. So I think freedom movement is just like for sure one of my things that I can push through it. I can, I'm pretty tenacious when I have a goal or if I need to, stick to my guns about something. But I could tell you, I would rather not sit all day long every day. Once in a while is okay if I have to, if I need to, help make some money or something, sitting in the operating room. But, long days every day, it's not my ideal version of my life. Let's just say that.
How come you're sitting? Why aren't you standing?
Oh, trust me, I stand or I'll do some squats and, change it up. I have to, like, my nervous system requires, I think movement's good for us, but also I feel very like angsty, if I'm sitting consistently the whole time. Plus I don't, want my bottom to form the shape of me sitting all the time. Like you got to give it some variety. Otherwise you look like you've been sitting all day. So
that was one of the reasons. I was interested in pain, but one of the other reasons I actually went into pain when I did my fellowship was because of the OR. And in a weird way, I love the OR, loved it. What I hated was I didn't control my time.
Yeah,
I hated that.
yes.
It didn't matter how fast you were. It didn't matter how good you were. You were at the mercy of the surgeons, and you make me so mad. They'd leave and they have the intern clothes and they're, well, it took so long because you had the intern clothes. You're off doing whatever. You're not here, and I couldn't stand. I hated that. I am a moderate, little bit of a control freak when it comes to certain things, and my time is a big one.
Yes.
But that was what I mean, that I know that factored into my decision to do pain, because I was like looking at different fellowships and different subspecialties for anesthesia, and there are almost none that allow you to control your time as much as pain did, because then you would have a clinic. Now that wasn't the only reason I did. Again, I was fascinated with pain, and it was only later that I discovered it's all built on voodoo interventional pain. But yeah, not because otherwise I think I love the OR. Like I had such great experiences there, and I just enjoy the environment and the kind of that little fine-tuned dance that when it's taking place. But man, just control of my time is like a big deal to me.
Yeah.
Although in this present age, when I am now, so I've moved away from being in full control of my time when I worked for myself to now being an employee again, and it has chafed here and there. Although I have pretty flexible in some ways. But I've reframed that into, well, what would I do otherwise? What else would I want to do? And that is super challenging. That is, maybe I have to get down after this and start writing out more of what I don't want to do. Yeah. But it's, I don't know. I think these are questions that you can ask at any point in your life. And the other thing to remember is they can change. Just because you say it at one point, maybe when you're 22, you're a different person when you're 32, and you're certainly a different person at the age of 42. And what you can play with these as well. Like people say, well, who you are is who you are. No, who you are changes over time. Your life experiences sort of molds you and changes who you are. And a fun exercise that I used to do when I would travel to events a lot, because you're going by yourself, is you can sort of pretend to be somebody else. Like I am naturally not a super extroverted person, but when I would go and travel by myself and it was only me, I would try to become more extroverted. And so maybe you don't know who you are or who you want to be. But there's all these opportunities to go be just pretend to be someone else and see if you like it. And that's if we just started making these decisions in a way that were not, permanent in any way, shape, or form for some things. If you think you want to do this, well, if I really think I want to be a writer, well, go be a writer, write, and see what happens.
Yeah.
I think I want to go, do whatever. Well, go start climbing mountains if that's what you want to do, and see if you enjoy it. Anyway, so you can, they call it, the fake it till you make it thing. And there actually is some science behind that. Is once you start doing it, and once you are around people who are doing it, there's this kind of slow sort of shift into a new identity over there. And you may actually become, if you don't feel it, that's who you are, but you kind of admire that. Get in that scenario, do those actions, be around those people until you start morphing into that type of person.
Yeah, because there's a it's important. We may define ourselves. When I ask myself in my 20s or 30s, who am I? That doesn't mean it limits you to just that. You can create, or what do you want to become is also an appropriate extension of that question. And I can tell you of a lady in her late 60s that I work with that became an RN in her late 60s because she believed that she wanted to become that before her life, was done. And by golly, she did it. And I kudos to her, and don't let other people outside limit you. But like, you were saying, Kevin, it's not like you're dished out the whole buffet of life in your, college years, and and have explored every little thing on that buffet. Like, your little life experiences have only given you certain exposures, and you have no idea what you're capable of or what you would enjoy. Or you hear all the stories that, if it wasn't for meeting this person or being exposed to this, and then going down this path, it was all like this serendipitous stuff that happens. And then they realize their life's purpose and they feel connected with it when they had no idea 5 years before that was even going to be part of their life. Like, so you have to keep your eyes, ears open and be open for opportunity, but you have to be willing to explore and not limit yourself to this old view of yourself, or the you that was really created by others. And so I always feel like you can create the life. You don't necessarily, there's a great quote that I can't say exactly. I don't know who said it, but it's not like you find your purpose or find your meaning. Like, sometimes you create it.
So. No, I totally agree. And just to kind of hammer onto that is this, experiencing things.
Mm-hmm.
Like really, really, really going out and experiencing things. Like if I could just go back in time and tell my younger self anything, I would say do more. Do more stuff, try more things, do more, and have more experiences. Is because it's those experiences are going to shape who you are, kind of give you greater depth, and kind of define what it is that you like now. You don't. And I would be trying even things that I didn't think I would necessarily like. I wouldn't be doing dangerous things like, I don't know, swimming naked with sharks with blood coming off of my body, because that makes you cool. And I don't think that makes anybody cool, and don't ever do that. But I would certainly try a lot of different things just to have those experiences, and rather than kind of preemptively saying, oh, that's not who I am, I don't do that. Like, you really don't know.
Yeah.
And I've been the most shocked on things that I thought I wasn't going to like cruises. Like cruises, like that was a very big one. Yeah, but I mean, it's just, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, all these preconceived notions that I had were not true.
Mm-hmm.
And that opens up a whole new venue. And then I have college age kids now, so I'm trying to encourage them, because all this, the weirdest part about, like, you just said the buffet of life. I love that. The buffet of life, right? The buffet of life, you can't see all the dishes, just like on a regular buffet.
Yeah.
In a regular buffet, the smart people to do a buffet is you actually walk the buffet and scan around and look it all over before you get in the line, so that you kind of have these ideas. We can't do that naturally in life, but you can explore.
Yes.
And when you're in college, especially, man, explore and explore and explore. There's so much there. I mean, there was majors that I didn't even know about until after I graduated.
Yes, me too.
And it's like, whoa, I didn't even know people were doing that. And it's like, I don't know. And then how do people find this stuff?
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
explore, and no matter what your age is, explore, do new things, get, accrue experiences. And through those experiences, then you may ask you those questions. Well, who are you now? That's another one.
Yeah.
After an event, maybe life, death, divorce, whatever, you don't have to be that old person anymore.
Exactly.
In fact, I would say you probably, don't want to be that old person.
Exactly.
Be a new person. Choose something new.
Yeah. Well, one of the last things I wanted to mention is we talked about exposure, and I think of, we had the pandemic and the realizations of our mental health and how isolation can have its own impact on our mood and whatnot. But, I think it's really important, as much as I enjoy being home and just, being kind of in a quiet environment and just doing my own thing, because I think I favor more the introvert side of life. I really think it's important that people get out of the home. You cannot expand yourself very easily when it comes to exploring other people, relationships, places, things, if you stay at home. Now, if you're completely content and you know who you are and what you're doing gives you purpose and meaning, and, I feel free, I feel like I enjoy my time, then you're probably, you could probably just be fine being a recluse for the rest of your life. But I think the most people need to get off their ass. Sorry, I probably just lost our ratings there. Or our G rating.
Like, we're explicit for some reason. I don't even know.
Yes, we're explicit.
We should cuss more, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you have to get off your ass, and my mother will be, if she hears this, she won't be happy I said that. And you have to go and explore life, and I speak to myself too. Like, you have to get out there and try new things, and otherwise you cannot expand yourself. Your mind is what is creating this interpretation of who you are and what your meaning is and your perception. And like you said, every 10 years you have a different perception, most likely, of yourself and the world around you. And if you're going to stay very closed-minded and only stick around the same people all the time, then you're never going to expand your mind and have a worldly view of things. And the wisdom you have is going to be very limited. At least that's my take on it. And any comments off that?
No, I think, getting out of your, getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Really. Becoming comfortable, being uncomfortable is a huge thing. And it is difficult. I mean, it's easy to say, it's harder to do. I'm a very comfort person, and getting out of my comfort zone is very uncomfortable. And I'm not that great with being uncomfortable outside of my comfort zone, but I'm aware enough to actually try.
Yeah. Which expands you.
Which it definitely expands you. And there have been moments when I've done things that I was like, whoa, I can't believe I did that. And I literally have really, really, they changed my life. They changed my life. And then you're like, oh, I should do more of those. And then it comes back, and then you can kind of trip back in the thing. And then you have to push yourself out of that rut again. But no, I would agree on that for sure.
Yeah. Well, any other last comments? Otherwise I'll take us out.
Yeah, take us out there, Scotty.
Okay. All right. Well, just to recap, it's good to always ask those questions, who am I, or maybe what you want to become, or who have I been? I mean, maybe reflecting on those things, and what do I want to do with my life, or maybe what I don't want in my life. And lastly,
you know what? I'm going to actually, I don't think that's the question to ask, is what do I want to do with my life?
Okay.
I think it's probably more appropriate to, what do I want to do to live now, right?
How do I want to live?
How do I want to live, right? And I because I think that becomes important, is because if none of these questions are like we're not creating or ending the universe here, right? These are not like, oh, because if you frame the question in such a way that becomes pretty overwhelming, then it becomes easy to paralyze. It's like, well, what do I want to do now? Right. Granted, there's some choices that are a little bit longer, like in medicine, but one of the reasons that we did this podcast is to say, yeah, you may have chosen a specialty, you may have done, been in a practice model, but that doesn't mean you have to maintain that. Mm-hmm. Right. We're not like choosing, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? It's really as well, how do I want to live now? Yeah. Is just a little bit of a different frame on that, despite the fact that we're always asking kids, like in high school, well, what do you want to do with your life? That's the stupidest question. And yes, I have asked that and said it, and it has been dumb.
We've all done it.
But every time I think about it, what a stupid question, and particularly a stupid question to ask an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, that is just asinine.
Limited experience.
You haven't lived. It's like, that's the question is how did you live your life when you're 80? That's a much better question to ask, because you've actually lived the life, and you can say, well, yeah, unfortunately there's no do-over. So it's like, oh, did I do a good job? So, but
how about, let's reframe. So who am I, or who do I want to become? Or who was I? I mean, all those past, present, future. And then how do I want to live right now, or not live based on my past? And thirdly, how do I want to use my time, which is kind of the same thing.
Yes, but it's a better one, because the how do I earn time without money is very specific, just the time. Right. If you are finding something that you are so fulfilled with, maybe there are people in clinical practice that love what they do. Mm-hmm. But despite despite the system, and then you have all these people, well, you need this, and you need to be doing, and you need to be passive income, and invest in real estate, and do short-term rentals, and all that stuff. And that may be being like, then you're feeling this external control of like, well, I just really enjoy what you're doing.
Wrong?
Yeah, am I doing it wrong? Then do it, right? Yeah. Because if you were somewhere in your, what's the thing is, if you think about do what you love and you've never worked a day in your life, mm-hmm. right? So I don't think it's necessarily thinking about passive or whatever. It's like, what do you want to do? How do you want to spend your time? And then making sure that you can do it provides a frame that allows you to do it. Because the other thing is, you don't necessarily have to buy a bunch of real estate or have all this passive income. If you hate your practice and that's not how you want to live. We've talked to people who do locums, where, go to a locums and you work in contracts 2 weeks and then spend in 6 months in Crete. These people will live in these countries and come and do contracts for a month or two, and then they go back and live in the middle of the Mediterranean.
Yeah,
so you can do it, but you have to ask the right questions that allow you to have that answer, versus kind of honing down to something very specific about, well, I need to have passive income. Well, why do you need passive income?
Right.
It's really a question of how you want to spend your time.
Yeah. No, these are very deep questions, and it takes a lot of reflection. And so I feel like what we're trying to do is let people know that these are questions that in your middle of your life, sometimes earlier in life, you start asking yourself, depending on what the course of your life has presented to you, especially during big moments like, life events we just discussed recently, like divorce or whatnot. Or realization of the path you chose in medicine. What were we going to say?
And I was going to reiterate again, is that what your choices were 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 3 years ago does not mean they have to be the same choices now. Give yourself permission to change.
Yeah.
We are not biologically, we're extraordinarily resilient, and our bodies can compensate and do all sorts of things, right? They can compensate and grow and hypertrophy and recover. Well, internally, our personality is going to do the same thing. And just because you were someone in the past doesn't mean you have to be that same person now. And in 10 years from now, you may want to choose to be a different person then.
Yeah. You just made me think of, I've been questioned by several people in my life. Why, first of all, pain. Why don't you just did all the training to be a pain physician? Why would you not use your training? I'm like, well, because it doesn't feel right. Like, it just doesn't feel right. Like, I didn't do a day in private practice other than locums for a few days after finishing my pain fellowship. And then, down the road after doing anesthesia, you sit there and question, want to do part-time, and then people don't understand you, look at you funny, and they're like, you just train like 13 plus years or whatever. Why would you and other people be so miserable? And why would you not want to do what you're doing? Like, I get this from multiple people, and it's so hard to answer because it's so complicated. And it's really, there's some deep reasons behind that, but a lot of it is, yes, we change as people. We recognize a system that's changing before us, and it doesn't give you the same kind of gratification, and or maybe it's just you're bored. You've been doing this 20 years, you want to change because you as a person like change, you like trying new things. You don't always have to go down deep into every single thing. You could just skim the surface and be happy with the discovery of different things. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I feel like that gets questioned, not just me, but other people when they're asking, especially non-medical people, that like, why would you want to, like, you train so hard and you make a good living, like, why would you hate what you do, or you not as satisfied or gratified by it?
Well, and that's not even the bad scenario. Is the I think the even worse ones is the guilt tripping that people do doctors. I don't know if you see like in people like become financially independent for however way, or they trying to change their life and they're like, why are you doing all this? You're depriving society from physicians because you're not practicing for 50 years. And that's all their problem, right? That isn't your responsibility. You're responsible.
Contributed already.
You've already contributed already. And I think that reflects back to question one is who are you? Are you someone who is, identified what your values were, identified actions that are in alignment with your values, frame some beliefs that provide a perception that kind of allows you to act in a way that supports your values? Or do you not know who you are, and you're relying on everybody else to tell you who you are? Yeah. And that's a opportunity for people to shame and control you, and then to keep you in positions or tell you, well, you're not good enough, or you can only be in this position, or you can't leave your job because what was the other one? I can't leave my job because even though everything is horrible, because then what are my patients going to do? Well, I understand that, and you care for your patients, but you're given notice, man. You are not responsible for the world.
Yeah.
And if you're not taking care of yourself and being true to yourself, then I guarantee you're not going to be able to help as many people as need it throughout your life than to, kill yourself in a health system that doesn't appreciate you, and you're miserable, and you're doing it because of this external idea that somehow your patients have to have you.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, unless you can totally radically change the medical system to the way you want it and it's going to gratify you, I think you should have only people in medicine that are motivated, are driven to do this and enjoy it, or to some level get gratification in helping others. Like, if people are miserable, like, we don't want those people still in medicine if they can't find a way to find joy in it. Like, wouldn't you rather have a physician or someone taking care of you that actually is enjoying what they're doing and wants to be there, versus the others? So anyway, any other last thoughts before I finally take us out?
There's always last thoughts, but no, I'm not going to say any.
Well, okay, let me see if we got this right. We're saying reflect on maybe who you are, who you were, who you want to become. Secondly, how do I want to live right now? And thirdly, how do I want to use my time? Does that sound better?
I like those.
Yeah.
I like those a lot.
And
then the negative being who don't you want to be?
Right.
What don't you want to do? And how do you not want to be spending your time if you can't answer the other ones?
There you go.
Those sometimes can be a lot easier to answer.
Yeah. The mirroring of those questions will be the mirror unto yourself.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, very, very cool. Well, thank you for joining us again for another episode on The Change Physician. If you don't know what The Change Physician is all about, go to thechangephysician.com, or you can find us on Instagram to see what's been posting on the podcast. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care.
Stay well, folks.